All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Emily Catalan. I am a master's student here at Texas A&M University. And today we'll be talking about Diffusions of Innovations by Ever M. Rogers. And before I begin, I do want to highlight that there is a handout attached to this presentation. And on that handout, you'll see that there are questions you can answer and notes you can take as we follow along. I do want to make this presentation as interactive as possible. I do think one can learn very much from that. I know I took this idea from a professor I had at Texas State. She was my animal science instructor, and she would give us these packets with notes, and we would kind of fill in the blank, and it kept us engaged, and also was very beneficial whenever it came to studying for finals. So I thought of this idea to help you throughout the presentation, and also just to keep to look back on whenever you're thinking of innovations. So let's begin. So today we will be having three objectives we want to hit. So the three objectives that will be discussed will be, what is computer-based farming game? Then we'll discuss the one variable out of 5 that determines the rate of adoption of innovations. And then also we want to make a connection between the attribute of innovations with relation to the rate of adoption in relation to this article specifically. So let's begin. So what are we even talking about today? So our article that we'll be discussing, very, very hot topic. The article that will be discussed is called Utilization of Computer-Based Farming Game with Beginning Students in the College of Agriculture. This is by Stephen T. Sonka and Marvin T. Bate. So the idea or the innovation came into play when the College of Agriculture realized that there's a huge shift in the student population at the agriculture college. So they realized that non-farm students, or students that have either little to no farm experience growing up, have been increasing in the College of Agriculture. However, the shift of population, so that with the huge increase, there's been a big shift that before, the students with farm experience are now sometimes in the minority. So with all these new students coming in with no farming experiences, sometimes there's less students who do have farm experience in the College of Agriculture. So those are pretty cool to read about. But the two issues that they wanted to discuss and solve was to aid non-farm students who are at a disadvantage with terminology and ruminant concepts, specifically in this article. And they also, equally important for both groups, they want to expose early on to the students about agriculture production sector. I read that in the article that it is a very rapidly changing institution where the future participants, or in this case the students, need to be high expertise and be trained a lot in this topic. So they wanted to both incorporate this computer-based farming game to aid them in understanding these concepts. So as discussed in our objectives, so here we have our 5 variables determining rate of adoptions of an innovation. So we have perceived attributes of innovation, we have type of innovation, decision, we have communication channels, and we also have the nature of social systems and efforts of change agents. So as I mentioned, I do want to make this as interactive as possible. So for our first question, and you can circle this on your handout, but guess which topic we'll be discussing out of those 5? I'll give you a few seconds to get that in your head. You circle it down, and then we'll move on. So if you guess number 1, if you circle number 1, you are correct. We'll be talking about the perceived attributes of innovation. We'll be talking about these 5 specifically, these 5 attributes, which are relative advantage, compatibility, complexity, triability, and observability. As I mentioned, the objectives, we'll be talking about how these influence in the article that we were discussing. So let's move on. So here, as you have those 5 attributes, I do want to highlight, if you look on your right, you have this little sticker. It says, be on the lookout for me. So I really like this, this picture because it shows that if you don't, we'll be talking a lot about the definitions of each of these attributes. And what this picture does, it kind of puts it into a question to kind of better understand it. So it can be much, so one can understand it a bit easier. So I find it helpful. So be on the lookout for those little stickers. In the case that if one of these definitions are too complex for you or you just don't understand it, these questions kind of will answer that. So again, we're going to do with one other question. So for question number 2, what is relative advantage? So is it an innovation is seen as better than idea before? Is it an innovation that has an advantage? Is it a family relative came up with innovation? Or is it the term Roger refers to as an innovation being weak? So once you, give you a few seconds, but once you have your answer, you can circle it on that handout, or you can also press start on that bottom right, okay? I'm just kidding, you can't click the bottom right. This is just a presentation, but that was really cool. I wish. So if you have your answer locked in, let's see what the response is. So if you guessed A, you are correct. So relative advantage is a degree to which an innovation is perceived as being better than the idea it supersedes, or the idea from before. So remember about that little sticker? Is it better? So in relation to the article, so the old idea, the old practice was lecture. So these 4 freshman orientation courses that the College of Agriculture provided were mostly done in lecture. So a lot of non-farm students were at a disadvantage because they a lot of the lecturers assumed they knew the concepts and the terminology, even though they had no hands-on experience as their other peers. So the better idea that was introduced was what the College of Agriculture did was develop a computerized farming game for freshman students in the introductory course in the College of Agriculture. And they primarily focused on students with a non-farming background. So that is the relative advantage for that. And now we're going to move on to compatibility. So what is compatibility? Compatibility is the degree to which innovation is perceived as consistent with the existing values, past experience, and needs of potential adopters. So is it appropriate? Does it fit our audience? So we're going to talk about 3 that we made connections throughout with the article. So we're going to talk about social culture values and beliefs. So the 3 different groups that were evaluated were the ones who lived on a farm, those who lived in a small town, and those who lived in a city. So there was a strong value to offer the same opportunities to these divergent backgrounds, to offer these students the same information and experiences so no one feels left out. That was a really strong belief and value that the College of Agriculture had. So for number 2, we have previously introduced ideas. So where does idea come? Where did it come from? So actually the University of Illinois, they made a pilot development plan in 1978 to encourage the development of programs to be used throughout the university. So the College of Agriculture used this idea to better help their department. So 3 will be client need for the innovation. Our client here will be students. So there is a need to familiarize students with agriculture production systems and to illustrate the complexity of a common decisions faced by Midwest farm operations. This is really big for the College of Agriculture. So both students, those with non-farm and farming experience, can be much more familiar because it's a very, very complex, or as I mentioned before, it's a very rapidly changing institution that should have a lot of focus on. That was what they believed. So moving on, we have complexity. So the complexity is the degree to which an innovation is perceived as relatively difficult to understand or use. So if something is kind of hard to use or I don't really understand it, it can be really difficult not to do it again. It's almost kind of like riding a bike. Like, oh, this is hard. I can't do it. So you kind of stop, because you're like, I don't get it. I can't get it. But in this case, in the article, I have these, look on the left, I have the results that the research conducted. And I'm only going to talk about 2, but you guys are more than welcome to pause and look at the different results. I also have the reference to the article at the end. But the 2 I wanted to highlight was that students of both groups preferred the challenge of the advanced version and the easy version or the no advanced version. So what I mean by both groups, I mean those who have farm experience, those who didn't have farm experience, or in this case, on a farm, in a town, or in a city. So if you look over here, there was very high percentage from both about using the novice version and the advanced version. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And then also, the other result that I found really, really cool was that those who had farming backgrounds were more likely to attempt both versions of the games, which was really cool. That kind of puts into perspective that those who wanted probably more of a challenge, those who did the easy game were like, oh, I already have farming experience. Let me challenge myself to like do the challenging one. So, however, there is one main thing or main problem in this case where the number of terminals to support the system, 1/3 of the students reported how difficult it was to gain access to the Play-Doh terminal. So 1/3 is a lot. And as I mentioned before, if it's difficult to use, it can slow the rate of adoption. So this was very, very interesting. And if there was much more students who had reported it or had difficulty with it, it probably wouldn't have been successful. So we have a trialability. So this is a degree to which an innovation may be experimented with on a limited basis. So in this article, they conducted the research. They had 79 students try the Play-Doh system and complete the interactive farming game. So they were able to try this out pretty easily. And I have on the left this quote from Rogers. If you have the book, it's on page 258. But it says that the triability of an innovation as perceived by the member of a social system is positively related to its rate of adoption. So from my understanding is if all the students had a really positive experience with it, that will play a huge part into the rate of the adoption. They tried and they're like, oh, this isn't too bad. This is actually pretty cool. Then that will definitely play a factor in the rate of the adoption. So last but not least, we have observability. So this is a degree to which the results of an innovation are visible to others. So in the article, after the trials, after the research with the program, the students were asked about the reactions of this learning experiences. And I have this directly from the article, but it says that students were asked to indicate whether these computerized farming games should continue to be available as part of the Agriculture 100. And students exhibit a strong preference for continuation of the 2 exercises. So the students very much favored these exercises and really benefited on how challenging it was, or how challenging, or maybe how more challenging it could be. So the researchers observed that with the students, and one thing too, that when the students are on the computer farm based in games, they also talk to their peers. So a lot of observability is also like talking to other people about their experiences, and like, hey, I saw you do this, what was that about? And they explain their experience. And so it kind of snowballs into a lot of talk and more students knowing about the innovation. So that is the end of our presentation. However, before we And I do want you guys to refer back to that handout that I mentioned at the beginning. And I want you guys to, there's 3 questions to test your assessment, to test how much you learned. And I want you guys to, for one, state one of the objectives, just like a recall. And then I also want you guys to tell me what challenges have the students faced with the innovation. I know I mentioned challenge, so difficulty. So kind of think back to what attribute had that in their definition. And then I also want you to think of just an idea or innovation that also has a relative advantage. That another example that you could think about in relation to those 5 attributes. So that is all that I have for you today. I want to thank you guys for playing. I wish it was very, you could click on the screen and stuff like that, but I do thank you for your interactions and the such. I also want to put the references here at the end, so if you guys want to read the article, then also more about the future of innovations. And then that, it is game over. So thank you guys very much, and you guys have a good one.